Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.
You are watching Conversations with Jennylyn, and I am always so grateful when I have a guest like my guest today. I am thrilled that he was able to afford me this time so that I can share him with you, because he has accomplished so much and has given so much to the world that I didn't want to miss a chance to speak with him myself. His name is Mr. Russell Targ. He is a physicist, parapsychologist, and author who is best known for his work on remote viewing. He joined the Stanford Research Institute in 1972 and worked with the CIA for 10 years until 1982. So welcome to my show, Mr. Targ.
Very happy to be with you. I'm always happy to have a chance to talk about the work that's been the passion of my life for most of my years.
Great, and I hope that we can get it all in an hour, because you have done a lot, and I've been looking at all of your work, and I have so much admiration for you. So you are a physicist, and you worked at Stanford. Do you want to tell us how you got involved in the psychic world?
Well, I was able to get a job at Stanford teaching psychic abilities because I was already very well known for my work in the laser field. So when I was a kid in high school, my vision was very poor. I could not see things in the blackboard. So being able to see the world was always a big problem for me. So from high school days, I was interested in psychic abilities. But I knew that you couldn't make a living. This is in the 1940s, 50s. I knew that it's very hard to make a living being an ESP researcher. So I was also interested in physics. And after leaving graduate school, I had a unique offer to join Gordon Gould, who's a patent holder on the laser. And I knew him from Columbia, and he invited me to join a company where he was developing the very first laser. Now, we did not build the first laser, but we got to build a lot of very interesting lasers. And by and by, I came to California to set up a laboratory for General Telephone. So I spent a decade in California teaching people how to build lasers and build them very large, what became famous lasers. So by the time 1972 came along, I was pretty well known. So I could then go to NASA or go to the CIA and say, over the past 15 years, I've built a lot of interesting things for you that work in the laser field. And I have a new idea. I want to teach people how to get in touch with the part of themselves that's psychic. So when I went to CIA, the people, my friends there, who I built stuff for, I said, I think that I could create a psychic agent for the CIA who could quiet their minds and describe what's going on in different parts of the world. Would that be useful? They said, well, that would be very useful. And at a conference, I had a chance to meet Werner von Braun. And I had a ESP teaching machine with me, something that I had built earlier to teach people, something you could hold in your hand, and it looks exactly like this.
Wow.
Except this is the iPhone version, but it's a four choice gadget, and you use that to decide which of the four pictures have been chosen. And von Braun was very, very successful at that, and he invited me to meet the administrator of NASA, James Fletcher. And he explained to Fletcher that I wanted to set up a ESP laboratory at Stanford and teach astronauts how to get in touch with the spacecraft. So there was a science fiction character that I remember, Silver Hardin. I'm going back to my childhood in the Foundation series of Asimov. Hardin was a great semanticist, and he said, nothing has to be true, a thing just has to sound true. So what I was telling NASA is that we can help make a psychic agent, perhaps. I misspoke. We're telling the CIA that we could make a psychic agent. I was telling NASA that maybe we could look into the spacecraft. And I didn't know that that would work, but from my life experience, I thought that that would be possible. And I was able to give them a compelling argument. It could be true. Other stuff that I had done for them was true. So it was really the little ESP game that got us our first money from NASA to start a program at Stanford. And since then, since 1972, my principal activity has been traveling around the world, showing people how to get in touch with their own psychic abilities. And what I've learned is that most people can do this surprisingly well. They can quiet their mind and they can look into the distance and look into the future and describe what's going on. And this we call remote viewing. And not only did we do this for the government, so we had a program with two parts. We had a program that was basically psychic spying for the CIA. And I know you would not be interested in such a low-class thing as that.
Oh, I'm definitely interested.
But we were also scientists. My colleague Hal Puthoff and I were both laser scientists, both pretty well known for our laser work. And we were able to publish our ESP work, the remote viewing, get published those in Nature magazine and in the Proceedings of the Electrical Engineering Society. So we have very high-class technical publications in the scientific literature, in addition to finding a downed Russian bomber in Africa. And behind me, I have a picture of a Soviet weapons factory. That Pat Price was a psychic policeman who came to work for us, and he was given the geographical coordinates of a Russian factory doing something or other in Siberia. And he said, well, there's a giant crane there. It's rolling back and forth over my body as I lie in the sunshine. This is the biggest crane I've ever seen. Let me draw it. And I don't know if you can see it on the behind the head there, but he drew that giant crane. And on my picture, it says secret, because to verify Pat Price's crane, they had to look with American satellite photography and see if what the psychic policeman drew corresponded to what they thought was there. And it was an extremely accurate drawing. And that encourages them to support us for another decade, because his drawing so accurately corresponded to this giant 8-wheel crane that everybody was quite amazed. And we had other things to do. We found a kidnapped American general in Italy, and we reported on the American hostages. Richard Queen was the ambassador to Iran, and he was one of those who was kidnapped. And one day, the chief of naval operations came to us and said, there's a picture of a person in this envelope. We'd like to know what you can tell us about it. So I was working with an experienced psychic, and the psychic said, well, he's in the dark and he's very sick. He can hardly walk. He looks like he's going to die, but wait, I think he's going to get out of the darkness and fly in an airplane somewhere. So we gave that information to Jake, who is from the Navy. So there's a sick guy, very sick, but he's going to get out of it wherever he is. And 3 days later, the American Embassy arranged to take Richard Queen, who suddenly had developed multiple sclerosis, put him on an airplane and fly him to Germany, because the Iranians who were holding him captive did not want the American ambassador to die in their prison. So somehow the guy sitting with me in our little remote viewing room was able to look into Iran, see the sick guy, and be aware that 3 days later he would be going on an airplane someplace. And that's what we did for 20 years at SRI. We had a program basically doing research to try and understand how you can see into the distance and how you can see into the future on the scientific side. And on the CIA side, we were looking for hostages, downed airplanes, Russian submarines, and a general. We were really the X-Files at that time. We were sitting in our laboratory at Stanford Research Institute in Menlo Park, California, and every week or two, CIA would come in and say, "We have something we'd like you to find." And it's the idea that your consciousness penetrates everything. Your consciousness fills the whole world. So I was a child member of the Theosophical Society when I was in New York. So Theosophical Society was created by Madame Blavatsky in 1875. And I knew about her because my publisher, who was a distinguished publisher in New York, among other things, he published The Godfather, and he also published a biography of Madame Blavatsky. So I knew who she was. And in graduate school, I came in contact with their very nice facilities in Midtown Manhattan and joined the Theosophical Society. And I learned there, they were trying to interest me as a scientist, that I learned there the two great theosophical psychics working for Madame Blavatsky is a very smart woman. She gets a lot of bad press, but she was very psychic and very intelligent. And in one of her early books, she says the periodic table of the elements has just been created. And this is like 1880 periodic table has just been created. And Madame Blavatsky said, "I think there should be a psychic table of the elements. We should get our two psychics, who are Annie Besant and Charlotte Leadbeater, who are prodigious psychics. We're going to get them a block of paraffin, which is almost all hydrogen, and see what a hydrogen atom looks like. And then we'll look at all the atoms." And they did that.
Wow.
And they published this in 1895. And I happen to know that because I went to the New York Public Library and got the original publication from the Theosophical Journal, where Annie Besant said, "I'm looking at a hydrogen atom and the proton and a hydrogen atom, and it's triangular, the triangular shape, and at each corner there's a little ball. There's a fundamental unit of matter, and each of these three balls are connected by a band of energy." And I read that, and that exists. That's from her 1895 published journal. A mere 70 years later, modern physics said protons are more complicated than we thought. Protons are made of quarks and gluons. Quarks are the little balls at the vertex of the triangle, and gluons hold the balls together that would otherwise be repelled. So 70 years after Annie Besant drew the triangle and published them in Lucifer magazine, 75 years later, modern physicists, this is even, I was out of graduate school, gluons and quarks didn't exist when I was at Columbia. They only came along in 1965, 70 years after Annie. So 70 years after Annie Besant, quarks and gluons appear in the scientific journal exactly the way Annie Besant drew it. And then I wrote a book not too long ago called The Reality of Esp, and I have a chapter showing how very accurate these psychics were in the 19th century, describing the nature of atomic structure that wasn't even thought of until 70 years later. So she could look at something incredibly small, the smallest of the small things. She could look into an atom and see the proton.
That's amazing.
And big things can be seen also. When we were working for NASA, my friend George Pezertz, who was a friend of the program, said, I like the work you're doing with the ESP teaching machine, but NASA is about to launch a Pioneer 2 spacecraft to Jupiter. And he turned to our friend Ingo Swann, who is really the father of remote viewing. Ingo taught us the most important things in remote viewing, that you should not try and guess the answer, should not try and figure it out, but you should describe the surprising things that show up in your awareness. Just describe your own surprising images. Don't try and name it. Don't try and guess it. Don't try and grasp it. Now it happens that was all known by the guy on my door here, Padmasambhava, the Buddhist teacher of the 8th century. He wrote a book called Self-Liberation Through Seeing Naked Awareness. And he said, your nature is timeless awareness. This is the Buddhist story. Your nature is timeless awareness.
Right.
You're not really made of meat and potatoes, but you have access to move your awareness through space and through time. But don't try and grasp the things you see. Don't name them. And that idea of not grasping and not naming was known in the 8th century.
Okay.
And Ingo Swann was teaching us that. Ingo said, remote viewing is available. And to get back to my story, so I wanted to give Ingo credit for being the father of this whole story, the New York artist. So George, the guy from NASA, said, we're going to launch a spacecraft to Jupiter, Ingo. Is there anything can you tell us anything interesting we'll find there? Tell us something we don't know that we'll find there. And I'm sitting with Ingo in my office, and Ingo says to George, well, I see that there's a band of ice crystals all the way around it. All the way around it, you're going to find this thick band of ice crystals, the ring around Jupiter. And George, who's a pretty smart guy, said, Ingo, you're thinking of Saturn, aren't you? Saturn, the rings around Saturn. And George says, look, George, I've been looking at the solar system my entire life. Believe me, I can tell the difference between Jupiter and Saturn. When you get there, you'll take a picture of Jupiter and you'll send it back to me, and then you'll know that Jupiter has ice crystals. And 7 months later, the spacecraft Pioneer got to Jupiter, took pictures of the ice crystals, and we have those now as part of our records. And the point of my long story, where I say that consciousness penetrates everything, it means that consciousness can go from the tiniest proton in a hydrogen atom to something 500 million miles away. There is no limit to what you're able to see. You can see out into the planetary distances, or you can look into the atomic structure of a block of hydrogen.
So do you think the people who are incapable of accessing their psychic abilities, do you think that they're incapable because they cannot silence their minds?
If I understand, you say, do they have a problem because they cannot quiet their mind?
Yes. Do you think?
Yes, that's the whole Buddha. I'm a Buddhist practitioner, and first thing you should know is Buddhism is not a religion. Buddhism does not ask you to believe anything. What Buddhism says is there's a lot of suffering in the world. Most people agree with that.
Yes.
And if you had a lot of that suffering is because you haven't found the off switch. You go to bed at night and your mind is still chattering. If you could quiet your mind, then you would be much more peaceful and there must be much less suffering. So, I don't really teach people how to do remote viewing. I sit with them and create a quiet place of expectation where they quiet their mind. So, for example, I'm not going to do that with you now. But I'm about to do a workshop for a big group of people, and I will say I have an interesting object under my table here, and I know what it is. So you have access to my mind through mental telepathy. You can see the object directly through clairvoyance or remote viewing, or the easiest place to see it is that I'm about to bring it out and I'm going to show it to you, and you just describe the object that I'm going to put on the screen right in front of you. So don't guess what it is. Just quiet your mind and tell me about the surprising image that I'm about to show you. And if you felt like it, you could do that right now, but you don't have to.
Uh-huh.
But I just create I don't give them any lessons. Don't tell them what to do. I say, you already know what it is. If you just quiet your mind, don't make something out of it. Just tell me the shape and the form and maybe the color, the surprising that shows up in your awareness. And Jennylyn, that's the whole story. That's how I supported myself for 20 years, sitting in the dark with really hundreds of people. And my job was to get them to trust me, to quiet their mind, and describe the surprising image.
Well,
And that could be anything from a hidden general to Patricia Hearst when she was kidnapped in the San Francisco Bay Area. We worked with, go ahead.
I have looked at your work and it's fascinating what you've done. And I want to thank you for doing that, especially because I was born with a gift, which I now know is psychic. Growing up as a child, I didn't have a label for it because I was raised in a family who couldn't identify with it. And it's still not developed because I've never taken the classes. But one of the things I've observed throughout my life, it is frowned upon. And people who believe in it or practice it, they have some not very nice labels. And that's why someone like you, who is a physicist and who has chosen to research, develop, and practice this, is fascinating to me, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do this interview with you, because you are clearly a credible psychic person.
Well, going into ESP research is a natural thing. See, I had very bad vision as a child, so it's natural for me to want to go into optics, which is what I did in graduate school. And in fact, I figured out how to make glasses so I could read just by putting a tremendous amount of magnification in the bifocals. So all through high school, I had to read with a big magnifying glass, all through high school. But by the time I got to college, I realized you could put that magnification on my glasses. Nobody was doing that because they were saving it for when you're an old man. But I got them to give me a lot of magnification, and suddenly I could read. Very, very simple. But that was a good thing that I was studying that. But I was an enthusiastic cards player. I played poker and I played bridge, and I played in duplicate bridge tournaments. I was a serious bridge player, and I frequently had a flash of what the cards were in my neighbor's hand, in the opponent's hand. And in bridge, there are certain times where it could the card you're missing could be in this hand or in that hand, and if you can guess correctly, it makes a big difference. So I was very good at that, and that sort of steered me into. I was aware that psychic abilities occur. Just talk about coincidence. In my high school biology class, I'm 13 years old, and a fellow named I'm not going to name him because he's a famous psychologist now.
Okay.
A student came into our class with the ESP cards that J.B. Rhine was using, the circle, square, stars, wavy lines, and taught all the little children that there was such a thing as ESP and that it was being studied. And I thought that was fascinating. And because I lived in New York, I could just hop on the subway and go to the Society for Psychical Research. And they were very kind to a handicapped student who showed up, who wanted to know about ESP. And I began to read the literature of people who are doing that. So I was really a child researcher because I knew that all of this was available.
I believe that some of us are born into the world with some of our destinies already predestined. It sounds to me like, and this is just my opinion, that you were born to do this. Do you think if you didn't have the visual challenges you had, do you think that you may have gotten involved in this field as you did?
Sure, if I didn't have bad vision, I'd probably be a basketball player. You can't tell here, but I'm really a very tall person.
Oh, you are very tall.
Yeah, as an adult, I was 6'5".
Wow.
So I'd be a good basketball player, except I couldn't see very well, so I had to do something different.
Oh, that's amazing. But I wanted to ask you, because the psychic phenomena, remote viewing, it's also sort of new to the world in some areas. A lot of people have practiced it over the years, and some people who know of its power has hurt other people working on the dark side of it. But what I want to ask you is, did you have trouble convincing the CIA and the FBI that you had the ability to help them? Did you have trouble doing that?
No, because you see, I would never try and convince anybody that I was psychic. That they will throw you out.
Right.
But if I say there seems to be such a thing as psychic abilities, have you ever heard of that? Everybody's heard of that. You say, well, I think that I can teach your people to learn to do that. So I'm not claiming to have an ability. I'm claiming, and although I have done psychic things, one time when our great psychic Pat Price didn't show up for an experiment where we were looking for a missing person, I took his place and did a very good job of finding the person. But I don't normally do that. So if I go to the CIA, I would never say, I've learned to be psychic, can I work with you? I would say, I've been studying the literature. There seems to be a lot of psychic people, especially in Iceland and Brazil and in Holland, a lot of psychic people around. Wouldn't it be good if we could teach your agents how to do that? And of course, the answer is yes. If such a thing exists, that would be good. I said, well, just give us a little money. We just want to start the program, and we'll see if we can do that. And so I'm not making any claims. If I walked in making claims of my psychic prowess, they'd throw me out.
They would. I'm I'm sure they would. But you delivered. And I think like Patricia Mona, another remote viewer that I've interviewed, she said the difference between those who believe and those who don't is the experience. So when you have the evidence to show them, you can't really argue with the evidence. And I'm
Okay.
sure you gain
Yeah.
their confidence then and trust.
Yeah, today the evidence is very strong. It would be, as we published all this work in the scientific journals, and my CIA program is now declassified, so I can have a big secret poster on my wall here because it's declassified. So now if I'm doing a workshop or want to teach somebody, I can show all this very fancy work. I have a picture of an airport on my wall here, and my partner was hiding in South America, and each day Pat Price, the psychic policeman, was supposed to describe where he was. And one day he would say, I see he's in a church, or he's in a market, or he's in a harbor, or he's in a volcano. And then on day 5, he didn't show up. So, but it was an important experiment because this is long distance from California to Colombia, South America. So in the spirit that the show must go on, I said, I'll do it. And I just closed my eyes and I saw this airport on an island. And what I drew is in the picture, I show that there's an airport running from the ground to the ocean, and an airport building on the left, and sand and grass on the right. And I drew that. And I said, Price didn't come today, but this is my drawing. And a week later, my partner came back, and what I drew was an extremely accurate drawing of the airplane view of where he was. It's as good as anything we'd ever seen. And what's important about that is not the idea that I'm psychic, but it's that remote viewing is so easy that even a scientist can do it. You don't require any study at the monastery. If you just learn to quiet your mind, then you can learn to do this. And after I left SRI, my next life after SRI is I was putting lasers on airplanes looking for wind shear to avoid airplane crashes. And once again, my department was called remote sensing because we were looking at invisible wind shear so airplanes wouldn't crash into it. And that was very successful. But so I did that for 12 years. I left SRI because the work became entirely top secret, and I couldn't publish. It's be careful what you wish for. So our remote viewing was very, very successful. It was so successful that we no longer could publish anything because the CIA wanted to keep it secret. But eventually I left SRI and I was then teaching in all over the world. And the Italians are very psychic. And I had a friend in Italy who would set up workshops for me, which I did for 4 years. And this is mainly fashionable young women from Milan who were my customers.
Wow.
And they would come, and I would, with a translator, of course, and my wife. And we had this was a very nice time of our life. We would come every summer, we'd spend 2 weeks in Milan teaching these cheerful people how to do remote viewing. And they were more successful than any of the people I had tried to teach in America. And I had done workshops in Silicon Valley and at Esalen Institute, and people did pretty well. The very best people in America, the best workshop I ever had was the Society of American Dowsers, the men in their big bib top overalls who are looking for water. They did that for a living, and in fact, they could do remote viewing excellently, but very few other people. So I did 3 workshops in Italy, and in the 4th workshop, in a big session before I started again, I said, you know, I've been teaching this all over the world, and the Italian women are the most successful. Why do you think that is?
I was going to ask you that question. Why?
One of the women held up her hand and said, well, I think I know why. That is, everyone knows the Italian women are the most beautiful women, and they're also the most sexy. So why shouldn't they be the most psychic?
Okay, I get it. So I wanted to ask you, do you think as more people become aware that they have the ability to do this, that it would be more difficult for criminals and people who practice things in the dark to get away with it because they'll be able to find them easily?
The police are very interested in this work. The idea with the Italian women have much more self-confidence than, say, the women in Silicon Valley. In relationships in Italy, the women really run the show. The women are tough. They're also beautiful and sexy, but they're tough. And if somebody comes in and says, we're going to do remote viewing, they say, okay, well, tell me how to do it and I'll do it. There's no resistance to doing it. But yes, my psychic policeman, Pat Price, came. He had been the police commissioner for the city of Burbank, California. And he had a whole scrapbook full of cases that he had cracked with the ESP. He would sit in his police station, and when he would hear over the radio the dispatcher say a crime was committed someplace, the frightened man running away with a stolen car, Price would say, you should go north and follow this and you'll find the car. So he could sit in the police station and tell the dispatcher where to send out a car to find the criminal, because he could sense where the where the frightened criminal was. And we did not do that work for the police, but Price had a whole scrapbook full of things. And he used that as the gate, as the key to the gate to come to us.
Oh, got it. I've been watching a lot of your work because I truly love your field and I really like you as a person. And by the way, my viewers should know that you celebrated your birthday yesterday. But what I wanted to tell you is the thing that I was the most fascinated with is your story about being in the Kremlin, behind that closed door. And then later in your life, you actually visited the Kremlin and you were physically in the room you had been in remotely.
When we were looking for Brezhnev in the Russia, and we were asked toward the end of our program. I worked with a photographer who was a very good friend of mine, Hella Hammett, and they said, could you describe Brezhnev's office in the Kremlin? And we said, well, we can try and do that. And we don't need coordinates. We understand what you want to find. So I sat down in a chair and Hella lay down, as she often would. And I said, well, we're looking for Brezhnev's office today. And she said, I'm walking down a corridor, a lot of red decorations, red fabrics. In fact, at the end of this corridor, there's a door covered with red leather. And I said, well, can you open it? And she said, the door is closed. I said, well, I'll open it. And she said, I see you open the door, but it's dark inside. So as though it's a dream, I said, okay, I'll turn on the lights. There are lights now. What do you see inside? And she said, well, there's a window on the left looking on Red Square, and on the right there's a very big wooden desk covered with glass. And behind the desk, there's a door on the wall. And I said, well, why don't we open the door and see where that leads to? So she said, well, we're going down a passageway into the big computer room on the right side. It's full of computers. As far as I can see, there's one computer after another with lights flashing on it. And I began to feel frightened. I felt that I had a lot of clearances, but I don't have a clearance for the computer room in the Kremlin. So I felt this was a dangerous place for me to be exposed. I felt the Russians are doing psychic stuff also. It's as though I'm in danger of somebody grabbing my consciousness from the Russian program. So I said, you've described enough, let's get out of here.
Wow.
And 2 years later, after I was done with the SRI program, I was invited by the Soviet Academy of Sciences to lecture in the Kremlin on remote viewing. And I did that. And after everybody was very excited. And I told them that what we had learned is that there are no secrets anymore. You can cast your awareness anywhere you want to go, and there are no longer any secrets. And that caused a great hubbub in the Kremlin. And in Russia, whenever you give a lecture, everybody has a teacup or coffee cup, so they could just hear all the coffee cups shaking. As I said, no matter what you think, there aren't any secrets anymore.
That's what I was asking you earlier. As more people develop their ability to remote view, I think it will make it difficult for criminals.
Well, people are going to have to start to be honest, that you can't lie to your friends. So they said, is there anything you'd like to see as long as you're here? And I didn't know what they had in mind, but I said, yes, I'd like to see Premier Brezhnev's office. I don't have to meet the prime minister, but I'd like to see where he sits. And they walked me down this corridor and opened the red leather door, and it was just the way Hella described it. So I got direct feedback to see what she had exactly described 2 years before.
That is so amazing. It's very difficult for someone like me who does not have that ability to wrap my head around it. And I think as humans, when we don't resonate with something, we call it craziness because we can't Google it and we can't read it anywhere. It's something you have to physically experience. Sometimes I believe it, but a lot of people don't. And so it's fascinating to hear the detail that your ability allowed you to see remotely. Hats off to you.
Well, I've written a book called The Reality of Esp,
Yes.
and I have a chapter that shows you how to work with a friend where each of you can bring little objects for the partner to describe, and you can develop the feeling of trust and the awareness for what it feels like to be psychic. So my book is Reality of Esp, and I am able to publish all the stuff that used to be secret in the program.
You know, you mentioned the Lucifer Diaries. One thing I know is that the psychic gift, some people who have the psychic ability use the dark side of it, and they hurt other people with that. Do you know?
Well, the Lucifer magazine from the Theosophical Society, they weren't thinking of the dark side of Lucifer, the devil. They're thinking of Lucifer, the source of light.
Okay.
The Theosophical Society is very interested in finding the laws of nature and the powers latent in man.
Okay.
There is a very beneficial, uplifting organization. They want to understand the hidden parts of the universe that are not understood, and also the powers that are latent in man that they can stimulate.
Got it. So from all your years of working in this field, I'm sure you've had, I mean, clearly it's all made a huge impact on you because you're speaking of them clearly like they happened yesterday. But did you have any experience that just left the most indelible mark because it was so profound? And if there's such an experience, do you want to talk about it?
See, I'm sorry, you want me to talk about which experience?
I said, I know that you have had a lot of phenomenal experiences with your remote viewing and psychic abilities, but was there one particular experience that will leave an indelible mark because it was so profound? And if there is such one, do you want to talk about it?
Oh, of course. The one that no one can doubt is after I left SRI, I formed an organization called Delphi Associates. And one of the things we were interested in is, see, can you use psychic abilities to forecast changes in the stock market? Now, that's something everybody's interested in.
Yes.
And working with an experienced psychic, we decided that we would forecast changes in the future price of silver. Now, it's a complicated story, but I want to tell you, you can't read the big board on the commodity exchange. It would be nice, see, reading is analytical, and you can't do that. You can only describe how you feel or what you see. You can't say, I'm looking at the big board in New York and silver is going to be selling for 25. That nobody can do that. But what I can do is say, the broker has 4 objects on his table right now. One of them stands for up a lot, up a little, down a lot, down a little. And we're going to hand you one of those objects next Friday. Next Friday, we'll get together in my kitchen and I will hand you an object. And I don't know what they are, but the object corresponds to the price of silver a week from today. But don't worry about that. Just tell me what I'm going to put in your hand. Now, let's say there were 4 objects. There was a flower, a book, a coffee cup, and the broker's leftover pancake from breakfast. So, and I don't know that. I don't know anything about them. So I'm sitting with my psychic, and he says, well, a very strange thing you're going to give me. It's sort of round and floppy and had a funny smell. I said, well, that's a very unique description. I think that's all we need. So I would then call the broker and say, I got this strange object here, funny smell and round and floppy. He said, well, that's like my leftover pancake. What does that mean? He said, well, the leftover pancake means silver is going down a lot. So based on the fact that the guy in my kitchen saw a leftover pancake, we would then sell $20,000 worth of silver into the market.
Unbelievable.
And in 9 trials of doing that, we were correct every time, and we made $250,000 in the silver market. And it was written up in the Wall Street Journal. You want to know, did the psychic firm corner the silver market? And the important thing about that is not that we made a lot of money, but there's no way to cheat. That is, nobody could whisper us the answer. No answer book where you could look. The only place you could look is in the future, and we were able to do that without errors. So there's now there's a whole organization called the International Remote Viewing Association that got several hundred people who are doing various kinds of applied remote viewing. They're working to find kidnapped children. They're working with the police. Many of them are trying to forecast sports betting, which is much better than the stock market, because in sports betting, you can double your money on a single event, whereas it's very hard to do that in the market. So although some people are doing commodities futures forecasting, others are doing sports betting, and nobody is making a lot of money right now, but everybody is making some money. So this is going on now for about a decade. A lot of people are doing moderately well, but to the best of my knowledge, nobody has done nearly as well as we did. But I should say, my partner Hal Putoff, after we did this thing, did a similar thing to raise money for a school, and he was also very successful. So this can be done.
Well, I am so happy that I've had this chance to even speak with you, because you've clearly made such a huge contribution to the world. However, I want to ask you, were you able ever to save our country from anything catastrophic through your remote viewing?
No catastrophe. We found some kidnapped people, and that was good. And we found a downed airplane, and that was good. We were not in on things that would change the world occurred at a classification level above what we were able to look at. We had top secret clearance, so we could see satellite photography, but we were not at the highest level.
Okay.
What I could tell you, though, is that the source of psychic abilities that's most available is in your dreams. This precognitive dreams
Yes.
is often the source of ESP most people have for the first time, where they have a dream of something very unusual and then it occurs the next day. And you can learn, that's something you can learn, because everybody has crazy dreams from time to time. But you want to learn to separate out dreams that are anxiety dreams or wish fulfillment dreams.
Or warning dreams, because I get the warning dreams a lot.
Right. So you want to separate out wish fulfillment dreams or anxiety dreams from very bizarre dreams or very crystal clear dreams. So the skill comes in being able to recognize which dreams that you have are really precognitive. And you can do that by keeping track of your dreams, writing down your dreams when you remember. Or as I don't do that, but whenever I have a uniquely unusual, strange dream that I want to get, see, in my view, I don't get credit in the big book unless I tell my wife about the dream before it occurs. So when I have a very unusual dream, I'll tell my wife about it, and then we will watch and see if that's going to happen. And frequently, the source of the thing that I dreamt about shows up on my computer screen here the next day. That I often have a dream about the unusual thing that I'm going to see here.
Well, I have that gift. That's how my gift comes in dreams. I get, and they often happen. Sometimes they're warnings because I don't have the ability to see them happening. But that's how I know I have a gift. Oftentimes, when I call my children early in the morning, they want to know what I dreamt.
That's right. Or if you dream about your children, you could say, I don't think you should buy that motorcycle. That looks too dangerous.
Yes, like something like that. So before I wrap up, because can you believe we've almost completed an hour? It's so wonderful to spend time speaking with you. I find everything you do so fascinating that I could spend all day talking to you, but I know I can't. So before we go, what haven't I asked you that you want to make sure you leave with my viewers?
Mainly, I want to leave with the idea that there's nothing weird about psychic abilities. It's an ability that we all have, and you can develop that if you pay attention to looking at what goes on subconsciously. Most easily, if you're not working with a group and you're working by yourself, most easily, I would recommend you start to get in touch with your dreams. Write down your dreams. It's good for your mental health also. You may actually learn something. But write down your dreams and learn to identify the ones that really pertain to what's going to happen the next day. And that's a skill you can learn. And that's fun to do. It doesn't cost anything.
It doesn't cost anything. I am so grateful to you for this time that we've spent together doing this. And if down the road you'd like to do another segment, I would love that. Just let me know, because there is so much of this that people can, learn to develop and help themselves and help others. Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you, where can people find your material? Like, where can people find your books? And I know that you teach classes. How can we get into I would like to take some of your classes.
Well, I'm not teaching so much anymore. See, when I teach classes, I have to put a lot of energy into it.
Okay.
And make a commitment that the person really learns to do that.
Okay.
So I'm not doing that so much anymore. The book that I've just written is called The Reality of Esp, and that's hiding behind my shoulder here, the blue book. And you can just get that. That's about $12 from Amazon. And that has a chapter on how to develop your psychic abilities, and it describes all the work we had done for the CIA that was previously secret. So a lot of high quality things that we did for the government that can now be released that I've been able to publish. So also, I have a number of interviews. So I'm sort of all over the internet if people want to see some. Oh, I know where to look. I have a film called Third Eye Spies. So a person could take a look at Third Eye Spies, which is now available streaming. And if you're on Amazon, it's streaming at no cost. So that's a very comprehensive 2-hour movie with my CIA contract monitors on screen saying, yes, ESP is real. We were there, and it was even useful. So that if you want to see more following our interview today, take a look at Third Eye Spies on Amazon.
Well, I thank you so very much for this time. You are a gift to the world.
Well, thank you.
Others like yourself. And I'm so grateful that I've had this chance to interact with you. And I'm looking forward to doing another segment when you feel up to it.
And it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much.
And I thank you so much for watching Conversations with Jennylyn. I do my best to bring you fascinating people. And I'm sure you will agree with me that Mr. Targ is highly fascinating. Please check out his books and all of the work that he has done. It will make an impact on your life. It did mine.
Thank you very much.
I will see you next time. Thank you.
Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.
Watching Conversations with Jennylyn, formerly known as The Jennylyn Show. And as always, I bring you fascinating people with fascinating stories. At least I try to, and I have in the past, and today is no exception. My guest, Brandon Watkins, is a Stanford University Children's Hospital employee who has just done something phenomenal for the hospital. and I can't wait for him to tell you about it. Brendan,
Nice to meet you, Jennylyn. Thank you.
thank you for sharing this wonderful endeavor of yours with us. I saw you made the newspaper, so I thought I better go get that story. So tell me, what did you do?
So I decided to run a marathon on each of the 7 continents plus New Zealand, because some people consider New Zealand to be the 8th continent. So I decided to start in New Zealand and go from there to Australia, to Singapore, to Cairo, to Amsterdam, to New York, then to Chile, and then finally in Antarctica on consecutive days, and run a marathon in each of those places.
Wait, stop. Consecutive days? But these countries are so far apart. So tell me how you did it consecutive
Well,
days.
so that was part of the challenge. It's I'd heard about this sort of adventure that we were calling it, that was organized by somebody who I'd gone on one of these marathon adventures with before. So he'd organized this trip where we were flying on coach. We were flying on, like regular scheduled commercial airlines with regular flights. So we flew into New Zealand a few days early, and then ran a marathon that morning, and then ran to the airport and got on a flight to fly over to Western Australia, ran the marathon, then carried on each day, basically having a couple of hours sleep in a hotel, and then run the marathon, go to the airport, and then repeat, every single day. So.
Oh my God. So you ran 8 marathons, and how many did you win?
Well, I mean, some of them were pretty small, but I happened to win 4 of the 8.